Hey everyone, welcome to our third week of interpersonal conflict resolution. Now, I like to get practical and not only talk about theories and ideas that sound good, but also dive into tools that you and I can use in our everyday lives. So in this short video lecture, we're going to look at how to confront ambivalence. And so we're going to look at a specific process that you can use if you see that somebody is feeling ambivalent about something. And we will talk more about what that is, what that means, and then how to confront ambivalence in a good way in this video. Here we go. So first, let's take a look at what it means to confront. Because if you're anything like me, when you hear the word confrontation, you kind of get butterflies in your stomach and start feeling squeamish. Because that word confrontation for a lot of people stirs up feelings of high conflict, of being unnecessarily critical or harsh. And I put up there a new thing that I've seen on Facebook where some posts are saying, watch so-and-so drop a truth bomb. And for me, sometimes the word confrontation stirs up this idea of dropping a truth bomb on somebody, and nobody wants to be the victim of a truth bomb. Carries with it the idea of unnecessary conflict, or maybe even taking in I'm right, you're wrong, so you need to change approach. So let's look at a new definition of confront and kind of take some of the edge and tension off of the word. I love what our authors do, Henry Cloud and John Townsend. I love how, I had it right the first time. I love how they define confront not as being super critical, super harsh, but really it's taking our face and turning it towards a problem. It's taking something that's not being addressed and looking at it. So confrontation can be thought of similar to a warning light on a car. Might sound like a funny metaphor, but cars are really good at confrontation. So when there's a problem in the car that needs to be fixed, for example, the oil's getting low, the oil light will go on. When you're getting low on gas, a gas light will go on. If there's a big problem, your car will probably start dinging at you over and over and over again. One example of this is if somebody's sitting in the passenger seat and they don't have their seatbelt on. You'll hear the car ding and ding and ding and ding until that person fastens their seatbelt. That's one example of a confrontation. Car is simply saying, hey, there's a problem, check it out. There's a problem, check it out. Something needs to be addressed. So that's really what we're doing in confrontation. We're taking our face and we're turning it towards something. So what is ambivalence? Well, ambivalence is simply feeling two ways about something. And you can see the guy in the picture, he's got one thumbs up and one thumbs down. And it's how most of us feel quite a bit of the time. On one hand, we like doing something, but on the other hand, we don't. So an example of this would be dieting. Some people feel very strongly about wanting to lose weight, but don't like the idea of eating healthy or giving up brownies and chocolate cake. Some people feel very strongly about getting physically fit and really are passionate about staying in shape, but they don't really like going to the gym. Maybe you feel very strongly that getting good grades in school is important. Studying is important. You're here at Southern California Seminary. You're working hard. You're very passionate about getting a good grade in this class, but you don't like doing homework. And so most of us have ambivalent feelings about something. It's simply the state of having mixed feelings about someone or something. So if most of us feel ambivalent about one thing or another at some time in our lives, why do we need to confront it? What's the big deal? Well, chances are you're going to notice that ambivalence is a problem. When a person's very agreeable, they're saying all the right things, but then there's no follow-through. So if you're a parent, you might see this with your teenagers all the time. They're nodding their head, they seem very sincere. You guys come to an agreeable solution or agreeable conclusion, and then the same problem keeps happening over and over and over again. And so ambivalence can be problematic because the conversations sound like they're going good, but then there's no follow-through afterwards. And one of the reasons for this is that the ambivalent person may not even realize that they have these feelings of ambivalence. You know, when this conversation, initial conversation is going on, they look sincere because they feel very sincere right then and there in the moment. The passion's there, the enthusiasm's there. Intellectually, they agree. But then later on, kind of that ambivalence kicks in. There's that other part of them that says, you know what, I don't really like this. So you might have a conversation with a teenager about the importance of studying and working hard and getting good grades in school. And they're very passionate, very motivated, very excited. They can tell you why it's important to get good grades in school. They can tell you about what their future goals are and why it's important for them to do well in school. But then when it comes down to it, they're not taking the steps that they need to get there, because when it comes time to study, when it comes time to open the textbooks, that's when the other feelings kick in. And so not everybody who is ambivalent even realizes it. And of course, that can add even more confusion to the problem. So what doesn't work with ambivalence? Well, usually lecturing doesn't work. Stating you're wrong doesn't work. And looking at the person saying you really don't want to change doesn't work, because a lot of times the person does. When they're there and when they think about what their future goals are, when they think of the idea of doing well in school, this teenager might be super, super excited. But then when it comes down to actually doing the work, that's when the other feelings kick in. And so this is why ambivalence can be so difficult to confront. So now a really quick word of warning. Before we move on and jump into the actual tool for confronting ambivalence, I've got to warn you, the tool is gross, the metaphor is gross, but the good news is that it works. It's not my metaphor, but I'm including it in this presentation because one, it's very memorable. I don't think you'll forget it. And then two, it shows a practical way to very easily confront ambivalence with both grace and truth. So I want you to imagine it's a really cold winter's day. You're in a cafe and you've ordered a steaming bowl of your favorite soup. So I'm thinking of sitting at Panera. I'm in Minnesota now. It's snowing outside. The waiter comes, big old bowl of broccoli cheddar soup, little bag of bread on the side. I start stirring the soup, and then the waiter comes over and spits in the soup. Now, if you're anything like me, immediately you feel grossed out. You don't want the soup. You take the soup and you give it back. So what we're looking at in this metaphor is called spitting in the other person's soup. It was a counseling technique. The therapist called it spitting in the client's soup. So spitting in the soup always works best in the context of a warm, supportive, caring relationship. It starts with letting the other person know that you're for them, that you're on their side. And that's something that we studied this week in our book, How to Have That Difficult Conversation. We talked about letting the other person know that you're for them, that you're on their side. So that's really the foundation for spitting in the soup. The second part is simply to point out the discrepancy. So you might say something like, hey, on one hand, I notice whenever we talk about your study habits, you're very excited, very passionate about doing well in school. I really like that you know where you want your career to go and that you're very passionate about pursuing that career. On the other hand, I notice when it comes time to actually study, you avoid it like nothing else. I hardly ever see you study. How do you reconcile these two? So kind of the key points here are first pointing out one side of the story, then saying, on the other hand, I notice, pointing out the other side, and then asking the other person, well, how do you reconcile these two conflicting ideas? And so really what you're doing is pointing out the ambivalence or bringing it into the other person's awareness. And then the third step is to be open to their conversation. So really this isn't a conversation where you're saying, here's the problem, change now. You're initiating a dialogue. You're pointing out that ambivalence. You're bringing it into the other person's awareness. And then you're opening a dialogue that hopefully will lead to a good, healthy problem-solving conversation. So why is this tool called spitting in the other person's soup? Well, that's easy. In our metaphor, soup is a good thing. And really ambivalence for the other person, it feels like a good thing. You get the best of both worlds. If I'm ambivalent about doing well in school, well, when I'm having a conversation with my parents, I can talk about my passion for school. And then when it comes time to study, which is something that I don't enjoy doing, I can put it off and go hang out with my friends. And then I can come back later on and kind of keep that identity of I'm passionate, I'm goal-driven, my education matters to me. So really I get to keep the best of both worlds. I get to hold on to this identity that's really important to me of being a good student, but I also get to avoid the pain of studying. So a little bit of spit ruins an entire bowl of soup. In our metaphor or our illustration of sitting at Panera and somebody comes in and spits in your soup, you're going to take the bowl, hand it back to the server and say, no way, I need a new bowl of soup. Or you're going to get up from the restaurant, excuse yourself entirely, and go eat somewhere else. And so really that's what this whole technique is all about, is it's taking somebody who's ambivalent, who's holding on to the best of both worlds, and you're spitting in their soup. You're no longer letting them keep the best of both worlds. You're pointing out, hey, on one hand, I notice you say that you're passionate about doing well in school and succeeding. On the other hand, I notice that you're avoiding studying, you're not getting to class on time, you're not doing the things that a successful student needs to do. How do you reconcile these two things? And all of a sudden, everything may change for that person. They're no longer able to hold on to these two conflicting ideas at once. So now I want to hear from you for this week's discussion board assignment. 1, tell me, what do you think of this idea of spitting in the soup when it comes to confronting ambivalence? It might be a technique that you've used before. You might not have called it by the name spitting in the other person's soup. But maybe that's a tool that you've used to confront ambivalence before. You brought ambivalence to the other person's awareness. You've said something to the effect of, hey, I notice on one hand you say this, but on the other hand you're doing this. How do you reconcile these two things? Now, if you've used the technique before, I would love for you to share what it was like using the technique, maybe even what the other person's response was. You might share in your discussion board post how you plan to use this later on this week. Or if there's enough time, you might even go out and have a difficult conversation, use this technique, and then write about the experience. And then finally, have you been on the receiving end of somebody who had a conversation like this? Were you ambivalent about something, and did someone come to you and say something to the effect of, hey, I notice on one hand you're saying this, but you're doing this. How do you put those two conflicting ideas together? And if you're on the receiving end, it'd be great for you to share what the experience was like being on the receiving end of having somebody spit in your soup. What did the person who confronted you do well? What would you have liked them to have done? What could they have done better? So this is a great time to share your feedback, share kind of your own reflections, thoughts, fears, anxieties, things that you've seen work well, things that you've seen not work well. That way we can all learn from each other, kind of learn what works, what doesn't work, and how to take all of these ideas and theories and really live them out in real life situations. So I look forward to hearing more of your thoughts in this week's discussion board.